Isn't it grand? Mr. Luthor knew part of your training to become Superman was a hologram of your birth father, Jor-El. He thought a hologram of himself might be comforting. Mr. Luthor can be so thoughtful sometimes. The dawn of DC. Following Dark Crisis and Lazarus Planet, it's set to be a relaunch for the DC universe, sort of. Or rather, certain comics are set to have a brand new status quo. Some DC comics have been set to relaunch with new number ones. One such comic is Superman. Although in this case, it's more of a retooling of a story that was already in progress, so now it will restart in a number one. So you can get all those variants and the markups in that way. Superman had been away on Warworld for an extended Gladiator arc. This was happening over in Action Comics, and while that was going on, his son Jon had taken up Superman duties here on Earth. Here on Earth, like it's actually happening right now. On Earth in the comics. Clark had also years prior exposed his secret identity to the world under writer Brian Michael Bendis, which we did a whole video examining. And that's not even the first time that Superman had had his identity revealed within the decade time of recording. But it was the one with more fanfare because the author was more well known, there was much more press surrounding it, and questions surrounding how it was handled. The decision was made eventually to undo the change, although some may not have noticed because it was referenced so little that some didn't even know it happened. But to undo the change, there was some explanation required, and that began to occur in Action Comics 1050, which we discussed when we discussed that identity reveal. It was pitched as a non-magic / putting it back in the box solution, wherein Lex did a psychic mind wipe on the world using Manchester Black, with the exclusion of some key players. So some important people remembered, and there were explanations given, like psychic blocks and the like. Now anyone who learns Clark is Superman will suffer some kind of brain injury as a consequence of their mind not being able to reconcile it. That's the Cliff Notes. Mileage varied on whether they felt that it worked or whether they felt that it made sense long term, while some just embraced it and loved it. So this was the way that was used to get Clark back to a more recognizable status quo for Superman number 1. This series to begin in 2023 and to be helmed by Joshua Williamson with art by Jamal Campbell. So how is Clark's return to heading up his own comic? Let's take a look and find out. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, let's take a look at Superman number 1. One of the things Joshua Williamson and Philip Kennedy Johnson, the latter writing Action Comics, highlighted when they discussed this new era of Superman was a renewal of classic style adventures and optimism in the book. And that's clear right off the bat as we open on a short flashback to Superman in Smallville, or Clark, little kid Clark. He's in his room listening to music much too loudly, music given to him by that bad influence, Pete Ross. Just amusing, think of Pete as a bad influence. Pete's so dramatic, we need to talk about Pete more. His father says let him be because one day he'll have tons of people telling him who he is, so it's nice for him to be able to march to the beat of his own drum. Why yes, this is thematic character foreshadowing for some of the emotional conflicts that Clark is about to undergo. This issue also has some very creative use of paneling and splash pages, such as how we transition to the present with key moments of Clark's life being relayed in the folds of his cape that slowly blends into him where he is saving a couple from Livewire. Livewire is briefly here, though there are hints that she may be utilized more later. Hopefully. Maybe that's just me hoping. She's got a combo going of her various looks, but she's skewing heavily towards her OG Superman TAS look, but with a jacket. Superman TAS is incidentally where she debuted. We did a whole Livewire retrospective on her character and history, so if you missed that and want to know more about her, I'll have the link down below. They do an expository Cliff Notes backstory on her in this because it has been slightly changed because there have been so many canonical changes in recent years of DC Comics, time of recording. It's after Superman defeats her, and they do it by utilizing a news broadcast to make it as unobtrusive as possible, or it feels as unintrusive as it can. Livewire, aka Leslie Willis, is lashing out in light of her podcast Shock Talk being pulled from streaming platforms and has attacked her former employer at his own wedding. Thankfully, the recently returned Superman arrived to rescue them. Hey, all the people who wanted her to have a podcast in the comments of the Livewire retrospective. Look, it happened for you. There are a few nods to Superman TAS littered throughout this, and they build up to a point that by the end, it begins to have that overall vibe. There are also nice little Easter eggs if you catch them. We see throughout this fight that Superman is talking to somebody constantly. Go directly to Livewire and take her out now. Hush. Did you just tell me to hush? You're such a mama's boy, you bum! This is quickly revealed to be Lex, who is very much backseat superheroing and also in complete mess with Clark / Superman mode. I'll be back. Livewire's fans won't be denied. You can't cancel me! That joke worked on a couple of levels. It's not just about her show being canceled, but potentially about being canceled on the internet. Well played. Or I may just be reading too much into it. Superman meets the new police chief, officiates a wedding, because of course he can, he's a super officiant. Oh, they do also mention where Maggie went. And we get to see those activities via a very fun splash page, where they're being depicted as Polaroids. Then it's Clark time. One of the things that ended up happening with the Brian Michael Bendis reveal is that it altered the relationship between Clark and Superman, the duality there. It really skewed it towards the Superman side, versus the idea that Clark is who Superman is and Superman is what he does. It became more that he was Superman all the time. There also was wasn't really any conflict with his job or personal relationships either, so a lot of those day-to-day scenes with Clark were phased out or played differently. And he didn't get treated like Clark as much. And there was also no tension there, and there wasn't new tension introduced because of the reveal either. But now that we're back to the more classic status quo, you can have those scenes again. There's some nice visual storytelling in this sequence. One, we see that Clark still has the mix of music from the intro flashback, the one that was said to be given to him by Pete, and even has the mix by Pete on it. So the flashback was utilized for more than thematic info dumping. It also establishes a through line of Clark relaxing to the same music linked to his childhood, that link between Smallville and Clark and the man he's become. Look at all these Pete Ross references. Are we about to have a current story about Pete Ross? It's been many years. The big bad is Pete, confirmed. We also see that Clark's byline is used to introduce him, as well as Jimmy Olsen when he enters the scene. So no one needs to say anything clunky when Jimmy enters the scene, like, oh look, it's Jimmy Olsen, ace photographer, ladies man, turtle boy. Lois is editor-in-chief while Perry's away on sabbatical. What a nice way to say recovering from a psychically induced stroke.
Honey, you've interviewed some of the most dangerous people in the world and lived to write about it. There is no one better than you to be our editor-in-chief, Lois.
I don't think that's how they measure editorial capacities. Wow, it says here you've been kidnapped over 100 times, and that one time you jumped off a bridge to try to get Superman to take you to work. I think that means you'd be the perfect person to oversee story priority, catching errors, liaising with PR and legal, and of course just basic spelling. Oh, and it also says here that you were entangled or seem to be romantically entangled with one of our top stories regularly. With conflicts of interest like that, you're hired. It's comic book logic and narrative story logic, not who should actually get the job logic. It's to make the story flow and have some conflict in that direction. For some will land, for others it won't. Miles will vary. Do you think that would be a good position for Lois to occupy? Share your thoughts down below. Clark slips away on the roof to ponder all the changes that have happened. And they added detail here that the headphones are to help him focus and filter out the noise of everything when he's having a harder time with it.
So much has happened since I returned. I'm trying to find my focus. I'm not totally used to our lives being back like this, but I'm happy.
So what's this really about? Now on the whole, putting the secret identity back in the bag, that may sound very much like that's exactly what's happening in this scene. So some may not enjoy that and feel that it's just being pushed aside and people are moving on, while others may feel that, well, Clark had lived like this for many years, so arguably it would make sense for him to be able to slip back into it. While others feel that this is the first issue, give it time, they may come up. We also established that Lex is talking to Superman all the time, and it's something that is making him feel guilty, like maybe he gave up on Lex too early. Maybe this time he means it. Maybe he'll change. He can change him.
For years I trained my hearing to keep an extra focus on certain people. You, John, my parents,
Bruce,
and Lex. Sometimes I feel like Lex is the only person I've ever given up on, Lois.
Hey, Lex gave up on Lex, but if you're looking for something to focus on, we have to have Clark kiss Lois soon because that was starting to sound very Clexy. I watched Smallville. Did you bring your farmer overalls from Smallville? So what I've learned from Dawn of DC is that Lois loves the role play. She's super into the costumes. We've got the Bondage Gladiator Warworld costume, and now we have farmer overalls. At least he doesn't have to go out and get anything for this. These are all costumes he already has. Let's add the black suit into this rotation. Lois yells Great Caesar's ghost as a distraction when Clark needs to change, which is Perry's catchphrase. It's cute. Now that she's editor, it's a nice nod to that history. It's just another little acknowledgement of the overall tapestry of Superman mythos that's in play here. The LexCorp building has reassembled itself to have a giant Superman logo on top, and that's a problem. And Mercy Graves, who apparently never skips arm day, is there to tell Superman Lex's latest scheme to mess with him. As a result of Mr. Luthor's most recent incarceration, all of LexCorp has been turned over to you. Lex also renamed it Supercorp, which if you watch Supergirl for any length of time or hung out in the fandom a little bit will conjure up very different images than what is happening here. So Lex is pitching that with Supercorp, Superman will get the best resources to help him be the best Superman he can be. All of the people coming together to help Superman. And the little intro video he prepared for him has the TAS version of Superman as the avatar in the video itself. Not the one explaining, but the little reenactor. Now with the support of the good people of Supercorp, Superman will have everything he needs to be the best version of himself, making Metropolis and humanity safe together! Mercy and her arms are pulling out all the stops. Lex always believed you were some big musclehead, but I know better. You are as smart as you are strong. Hey, get that hand off the chest. Enough people are flirting with Clark and Superman this issue already. The employees at LexCorp, Mercy says, are very much enjoying getting to work on plans that aren't evil or petty, her words. And also, if Superman pulls back, then they'll all be fired, because that's the way the contract has been laid out. You're very manipulative, Lex. This detail, some may also struggle with if they want a more real-world base verisimilitude. Also, Lex has modified the Jor-El hologram and is having it be run inside of this building. This with the program LLO1. I see you with the two L's. You're not slick, Lex. He's also designed this now Jor-El looks like Lex. Isn't it grand? Mr. Luthor knew part of your training to become Superman was a hologram of your birth father, Jor-El. He thought a hologram of himself might be comforting. Mr. Luthor can be so thoughtful sometimes.
Look at his eyes.
Mercy is an excellent trolling companion, just completely deadpan as she desecrates Jor-El's memory.
What a pro.
On his way to you, boss. He won't make it. Look at the perspective on his hands just popping out like that. Gorgeous.
Superman doesn't make it because he's waylaid by Parasite. He's trying to drain a bus full of kids. Parasite here is a slightly bulkier take on the TAS Rudy Jones model and is identified as Rudy. We also did a video on the origin of the Parasites. If you missed that, check that out too. Just a whole bunch of villains that we've done videos on.
Excellent.
Lex tries to get Clark to use one of his supercorp inventions, but he ignores him. This leads him to finding a whole field of parasites all on top of each other and intercurled. It's a very creepy image. It's a cool image, like a watered down version of something at the end of Slither or Society.
Society's ending went pretty hard.
I don't even think I can show most of Society's ending. Who remembers Society? Lex gloats as Superman is pulled under by the parasites that they have to work together. Cause it's not Lex that Superman is up against, but one of Lex's enemies. Hey, look, Bizarro and Silver Banshee. Classic Silver Banshee. Also Lex with hair. Oh, that means that we're not using the Silver Age's explanation that Superboy made him lose his hair and that's why they're enemies. Boo! The Silver Age called and they would please like you to use their explanation for things. Nah, it's fine. But that's always a funny thing to think back on. Before the comic ends, we get a teaser of things to come. Hey, Superman on a horse. And all of the teaser is narrated by sad Brainiac. And that was issue 1. So, thoughts. This is a very strong first issue that feels very much like a return to classic Superman. And a strong point to just jump on board if you've been away for a while. There's a lot happening, but it's presented in such a way that it's very easy to catch up with. Although admittedly what can be shuffled has been shuffled out. Things like the secret identity. So for those who may have wanted there to be more of a fallout for that, they may be disappointed. Although again, it is the first issue, it may come up. Some might feel trapped in the cycle of things not mattering. Now, if you were missing a more classic or rather post-crisis Superman onward energy, this comic may have been a breath of fresh air. You get to see a Clark that's still very much tied to his history with Smallville and is influenced by that upbringing and has these little hints of it littered throughout his life. You have a Superman who goes out of his way to help people with little things, but who can get emotional or overwhelmed, or even goaded into anger, with lots of different connections, both positive and negative. A more nuanced and human feeling Superman. The pacing of this was excellent, establishing multiple villains and threats at times simultaneously while hinting at an overarching big bad. Villain hierarchies, with Lex at the top, seemingly, or is he? We have a very petty but still strategic and intelligent Lex. Transferring the company to Superman so that publicly it's his name on it and it's all under the guise of helping him, which would work with all the Superman logo, or rather the crest of L everywhere, people would forget and they would start to associate Superman with that. So now if Superman pulls back or messes up, not only do all these people lose their jobs, but he looks terrible and he has to manage that as well. Well played, Lex. It also makes him look ungrateful and like he doesn't want the help of the people, which could cause conflict there as well. Although, I'm sure for some, miles will vary. Also, if you're a fan of Mercy, it's nice to see her take a more active role after so long. She also is a TAS callback. She debuted in that series. This whole issue has the energy of a TAS episode in terms of action and stakes, and for fans of that era and also those characters, this will be a treat. Especially when you think about the villains in play. Parasite, Livewire, Lex, Mercy, even the design on Brainiac. The storytelling is far less decompressed here than is the norm time of recording for many comics. In some comics, just one of the things that happened here would have happened, and maybe a teaser or something else, and that would have been it. The art is also standout, though of course, depending upon one's taste, that may vary for some. But regardless of where you stand on the art, there's also some very strong visual storytelling going on in this issue. Playing with the comic medium in terms of paneling and how information was relayed, as well as some fun splash pages. Reveling in the medium it is, a comic, and using the unique aspects that come with that to aid in telling the story. The type of story where you could likely tell most of what's going on, though admittedly not all, if you remove the dialogue. There are some sections where you probably wouldn't know, but on the whole, very solid. Now, while there was a lot to like about this issue, that doesn't mean that it will land for everyone. If one prefers or is used to some different characterizations of certain characters, this may not be one's cup of tea.
If you don't like the TAS vibe, this comic may have been difficult to get through.
Some may even feel this is a step backwards and not forwards. Some may feel it has elements of a rehash, what with the whole Superman and Lex need to work together. Some of the decisions may not flow for some to the point that it breaks their enjoyment. Lois Lane as editor-in-chief, Clark just slotting back into things, where's Jon or some of the other supporting cast members. Other things I may not have thought of that I'm sure if I didn't you will tell me down below. And for some it just may not grab them, not for any deep reason, but just because it's not for them. And of course there's the other thing to consider, and that's the price point. Some that's just too much to contemplate no matter how much it seems like they may or may not enjoy it. Particularly in this era where time of recording it's essentially guaranteed that there will be a trade at a later date, so some may just trade weight so they can get the entire story at that point, and a more durable format. Now this really worked for me, I enjoyed it and made me excited for the next issue, but those are just my thoughts and I want to hear yours. Did this work for you? If yes, why? If not, why not? I love hearing different opinions about things like that, so please let me know. Tell me. Are you ready to get invested in Superman again? If you weren't, if you stopped. Are you a fan of the art? If not, again, don't be afraid to say something. Once more, tell me things down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.